Welcome to Uncommon Ground. I'm Talal. My guest today is Billy Dib, world champion boxer, cancer survivor, and one of Australia's most inspiring athletes. His story is about more than titles or victories in the ring. It's about his resilience, his faith, and the courage to keep fighting when life throws its hardest punches. In this conversation, Billy shares the lessons boxing taught him about discipline and sacrifice, how his Lebanese heritage and Muslim faith shaped his journey, and what surviving cancer revealed about strength, purpose, and perspective. If you've ever wondered what it takes to rise after being really knocked down, in sport or in life, this is the episode you won't want to miss. Billy Dib, welcome to Uncommon Ground.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start from the very beginning. What's your first memory as a kid when you sort of woke up to the world? What's the first thing you can remember?
I remember my father purchasing a store in Engadine in the Sutherland Shire, and moving to Engadine as a 3-year-old. I remember vividly, our first days in this house that had a shop attached to it, and having my siblings, and just that was my early memories, just the shop and cleaning up and getting it all ready, and then life starts as basically as a young boy. At the age of 5, I go to start my schooling, and I remember my first day of schooling was, I remember vividly crying because I didn't want my mom and dad to leave me at the school. I was in hysterics. That was probably the earliest memory of my childhood for sure.
And Engadine is a suburb in southern Sydney, Australia.
Yeah, so it's in the Sutherland Shire of Engadine. It's in the Sutherland Shire, so in Engadine, we stood out like a sore thumb. Me and my brothers.
So tell me about that.
Yeah, so we were, brown skin, brown hair, brown eyes, black hair, and then these kids were white with blonde hair, blue eyes, and we stood out like a sore thumb. And basically, I don't blame young people for picking on you, because people feel what's different, and we were different. Like I said, we stood out like a sore thumb. So young kids found a way to bully us, and it was tough times as a young boy growing up. It was definitely very, very tough, and I think that's what made me who I am today. If it wasn't for that, they gave me the resilience to be as strong as I am today, to overcome certain things. And I think God puts you through things in your childhood that are going to prepare you for the later stage of your life, and that definitely prepared me. Yeah,
Tell me more about school. Which school did you go to?
So I started my schooling at Engadine Public School. The first 7 years was kindergarten through to year 6. 7 years at Engadine Public, and I was picked on maybe 3 of the 5 days of the week. I hated going to school. It was not a very pleasant place. And the thing was is that like I said to you, the kids they feared what was different. We stood out, really, really stood out, and a lot of the times we had to fight back. And then we'd wake up in the mornings. I remember waking up in the mornings and people would paint on our fence, "Go home, you dirty wogs." And the bus would stop exactly where that painting was on the fence. And then we'd be going to school and people would be talking about what's on the fence and that. It was just a way to attack us. But my dad, he always said, "We're going to kill him with kindness. We're not going to fight back." And even though we got into fights at school and we got sent home, and it was just a way to protect ourselves. But my dad was always like, "Listen, we can't fight them back. We need to kill them with kindness. Kindness is going to get us there." And eventually, the situation that I was growing up in, that really affected my education. I was a terrible reader. I couldn't read to save my life. If he said to me, "Read this page, otherwise I'm going to shoot you," I'd say, "Just shoot me, because I can't read to save my life." I couldn't read. I couldn't put a word together. I was terrible. And that was due to the fact that we were always getting attacked. And the thing was that, like, if you stumbled or you stuttered while you were reading, like, people were going to laugh. So you never wanted to take that chance. So eventually, when I got to high school, I remember my first day of English class. The teacher's name was Mrs. Chetty. I'll never forget her because she's still one of my closest friends till today. She changed my life. I remember the first day of class, she said, everybody open up the book to this page. We're going to read this book. This is the book. This is what's part of the syllabus and whatever it was. And all I did the whole time was pray to God that she didn't pick me. Because I was thinking, I've just started year 7. Like, the last thing I need now is to get bullied and picked on. And as soon as class finished, I ran straight to her and I said, Mrs. Chetty, I need to tell you something. I'm a terrible reader and I am begging you to the high heavens to never pick me to read. Never. She goes, well, why is that? And I said, I can't read to save my life. She goes, well, I got to teach you to read. I got to teach you to read. She goes, what do you like doing? And I was like, I don't know. She's like, what sport do you like? And I said, I love boxing. I box. I taught her box. She goes, okay, leave it with me. She goes, I need you to take time out of your recess or your lunch to come and see me a couple of days a week. Are you happy to do that? And I was like, absolutely. Because for me, it was like, if I'm hanging out with her, then I'm out of the playground and there's going to be no fights. And my dad had this rule that if I got into any fights at school, I couldn't go to boxing. So for me, it was like, if I get into any trouble now, I'm not going to box today. So I had to try to avoid that. So I thought, like, by being in the class with her, I'm avoiding the playground, which means there's going to be no fights. You wouldn't believe what she done. She went and bought 5 boxing magazines. 5 boxing magazines. That was like, at the time, each boxing magazine was $7. And she brought them to the school and she said, we're going to read about the fighters because you love boxing. So we're going to learn about fighters. And that's how I learned how to read, through reading boxing magazines, Fist Boxing Magazine, the Ring Magazine, all these magazines that she bought for me. That's how I learned to read. She was persistent and supportive, and she basically paved the way for me to make through high school knowing how to read.
That's fascinating. Which high school did you go to?
I went to Heathcote High School.
Still in the Shire.
Yeah, so still inside Engadine, and then down the road was Heathcote. So it was like, that was our region.
And you still stood out like a sore thumb.
We always stood out like a sore thumb. By the time I made it to high school, there was a couple of other kids in the school who were, there was some kids who were like African American. There was like, a couple of Chinese kids and stuff like that. It was still, I still got into fights. I'm not gonna say that I didn't, but the thing was that I knew how to box by that point, so I could protect myself. So I was like, I was the type of person, I never wanted to embarrass anybody in front of the other peers. So if I had a problem with you, I would tell you, let's take it to a place where no one's going to be there, and mono a mono, and we'll see who comes out walking, you know what I mean? It's going to be you or me. And, 100% of the time it was always me walking out and the other person walking out after me crying, you know what I mean? I was like, I dealt with things, you know what I mean? Like, but not too much. I always tried to just resolve it by speaking. I never wanted to fight because, as I said to you, if I got into a fight, they rang home, Dad would say, you're not going to boxing for a week. So there was a few times where there was no boxing for a week, but then eventually, that just fizzled out and it never happened again.
Come back to school and boxing. Tell me about your family, your dad. I'm happy to say, before I jump in there, that I love your dad.
Thank you.
Your dad, Haj Ali, has been, ever since I was 10, saying, Salaam alaikum. He didn't know who I was. Until I became an adult. Till this day, he smiles and he kills me with kindness.
Yeah.
That's so true.
And that's something that he taught us. And see, the thing is, my father and I were just having this conversation the other day, and he was talking about the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. He was saying that the way he used to deal with young kids, my dad was saying that sometimes you got young people who go to the mosque and the elders are shouting at them, why are you running around or whatever? But they're just young kids. Like, deal with them with kindness. Come to them in a nice way. They'll, make them understand that when you're at the mosque, it's about prayer and about learning and about, being calm. But when you're shouting at them, all you're doing is pushing them away from that environment. And we're losing these young kids to that because of the way the elders are dealing with them. But I would definitely say that my dad is a very, very special individual, and I just said it yesterday. I had a fear of my dad in a way. It wasn't a fear of him smacking me. It was a fear of letting him down. I never wanted to let my dad down. I was always so driven to succeed because I wanted him to be happy. And I would definitely say that, besides the birth of my son and obviously winning world titles, the greatest moments of my life have been when I've made my dad proud. I honestly, like, when my dad lifted me on his shoulders after I'd won fights, and like that's like, man, wow. What a for me, what that felt like for me. I'm not sure what it felt like for him, but for me, I was like, man, my dad's in his 60s and picking me up on his shoulders. Like my dad putting me on his shoulders, and this guy's got a bad back and all these things, but that was just the relationship I had with my dad. My dad's he's not my he's my dad, he's my friend, he's my Coey, he's my confidant. My dad's like everything to me. In that regard, like I can go to my dad and talk about anything. Sometimes he may agree and sometimes he may not agree, but we'll work it out. We always find a way to work it out. My dad was just yeah, he's just, man, he's just a special man. You guys already know. I don't even have to tell you, the community knows how special my dad is. He's been somebody who's gone above and beyond for the community. The Australian Muslim community is what it is today because of people like my dad.
I know all the Dib boys very well, and I've known your dad very well, but he's the captain of the ship. I love and admire your dad. And it's people like your dad who have been the glue for the Australian Muslim community, not for one day, not for 1 week, but for 40 years.
Yeah.
But I'd like to know more. I'd like to know more. So when you were in that shop, tell me about that. Tell me about the Dib boys. Tell me about your mum. Really like to know the early history in Engadine.
My dad, he had an idea. His idea was, I'm gonna buy this shop, and this is gonna lock my children down, and teach them customer service, teach them how to deal with people, teach them how to be kind, and and that's exactly what it was. I remember we all had shifts in the shop. I remember being a young kid and be like, Dad, please teach me how to work the till. He's like, no, you're too young. You're too young. I was in a rush to learn how to work the till. And once I learned to work the till, they gave permission to my brother Imad, Joe, Muhammad, and Nasser to take time off so that I could now work the till, But, like when you're a kid, you're fascinated in this thing. But then when the fascination was gone, I was like, oh my God, I'm stuck in the shop working, But that's what my dad taught us. He taught us, hard work. He taught us how to deal with customer service, how to talk to people, how to approach people. And that was something that helped us flourish in our later lives. My brothers and I flourished really well. We knew how to talk to people, how to carry a conversation through the store. If it wasn't for the store, we would have been just like everybody else. What I mean? Like,
Did you all work in the store?
Every single
So you were
one of us.
unpaid labor.
No, my dad was never like that. I'll tell you something about my dad. I remember being like, a young boy and going to school, and all my mates had all these really cool BMX bikes. Back in the days, there was these things called Mongoose, Redline, and all these amazing bikes. But they were like $600 a bike. My father had 6 boys and 1 girl. So could you imagine 6 boys coming to their dad and saying, Dad, I want this $600 bike? It's just like not feasible, It's really not feasible. It just wouldn't go work out. And so I remember wanting the bike really bad, and my dad said, I'm going to make a deal with you. He goes, you're going to work. When you raise $300 from working, I'm going to give you the following $300 and you're going to get the bike. A part of me was upset because I was like, man, I got to work now for this bike. But I'll tell you what it did. And this is how smart my dad is. Do you know that bike lasted like 20 years in tip-top condition? Do you know why? Because I had to work for it. Because if my dad just bought it, I would have thrown it in the rain. I would have never looked after it. I would have never nurtured that bike. But the end of that bike was my pride and joy. Why? Because I had to work hard for it. But that was something that my dad instilled in me. When you give something or when you receive something without having to work for it, you couldn't care less about it. You didn't give a damn. But when you got to work for that, it's and that's exactly what my dad did with all of us. Every single one of us. We all got, I remember my brothers, my dad would pay them. Like Imad, Muhammad, Joe, Nasser, they all got paid to work in the store, you know what I mean? But it wasn't about the pay, it was about what he taught us from that shop.
And did your mum work in the shop and your sister as well?
My mum and my sister not so much, but my mum would only fill in when my dad was, because my dad, we used to do a lot of Hajj trips when we were younger. He used to take a lot of groups to the Hajj. So my mum would she would look after the store for a couple of hours while we were at school, but then when we'd come back, we'd take over.
It was like the classic Aussie corner store, right, with the house
Exactly,
attached to it.
mate. We were famous for the meat pie in can for $2.
Right.
A pie in a can for $2. We were famous in Engadine for that.
You still have the shop?
No, my father sold the shop when I was like 17 years of age, and yeah, we moved on. But we had some great memories there. I mean, we definitely paved the way.
So, turning to boxing a bit, or a lot.
A lot.
So, when did this great love start? Because boxing has gone throughout your career, and it seems it started in primary school.
Yeah. So when I was 12 years of age, after going through what I was going through with all the school kids and all that stuff, my dad was like, listen, the way we're going to do this is we're going to put you in some after school sports. Maybe you'll make friends with the kids outside of school and then things will work out. And so,
Let me interrupt. Were you a troublemaker?
no,
Is that why you got in trouble all the time?
no. We listen, it was like trouble came to us. I mean, no one wants to fight, what I mean, but we had to defend ourselves. We had no choice but to defend ourselves. And so I was not a troublemaker, but I was a woodish. I used to love like playing and jumping out of trees and doing all these crazy stuff. I was always injuring myself because of my stupidity.
Woodish means out of control.
Yeah, but I was not a bad boy. Like my mom and dad will always tell you he was such a good kid, you know what I mean? But he had a lot of energy. I had energy. I wanted to play. But one day when we went to football training, because my dad put me in footy and I was playing for a team called Bosco Bulldogs, and I had a good time there. A lot of my friends were playing on the team. I enjoyed myself, but then we were big on the boxing franchise of Rocky in our household. All we did was watch Rocky movies. That was like something that was like on constant replay. It was like Rocky 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, constant replay, back and forth, And so, when I was at the footy field one day, the trainer pulled out some boxing gloves and pads, and that was it. I showed him what I could. Like, I just put the gloves on, and I was playing around with my friend, and my trainer was like, "Have you ever boxed before?" And I said, "No, no." I said, "But we watch a lot of Rocky movies, And he was like, "Mate, I think you found something. You should get your dad to take you to the Sutherland PCYC." And that was the end of it. I had to find a way to convince my dad to take me to the PCYC because we were already getting into fights at school and at home. Now my dad's going to let me go box. That's not going to work out real well. So I said to Dad, my dad was a massive Mal Meninga fan back in the days. He loved Mal Meninga. And so I said, "Dad, the trainer said that if you want me to be the next Mal Meninga, you got to take me to the Sutherland PCYC. I need to do some box exercise to get some extra fitness in that."
For football.
I played it like that, I had to be clever. Anyway, I remember the first day he took me to the Sutherland PCYC. He gave me a $1 coin because it was $1 to do the boxing class. He put the $1 coin in between the glove. I put the gloves on already in the car. I was ready to go, 12 years old. I walk up the stairs of the gym, and I remember the door. I knocked on the door with my elbow, and a guy by the name of Rusty Penton opened the door. And he opened the door, and he just smiled at me, and he goes, "How can I help you, young man?" And I said, "I'm here to box." I said, "Mr. Carpenter sent me. He says that I could be the next Muhammad Ali." You know what I mean? And he started laughing. He goes, "Why you got your gloves on?" I said, "Because I'm ready to go." And he goes, "Well, what do you know in boxing there's something called skipping, shadow boxing, hitting the bag?" I said, "No, I just want to fight. I just want to fight." When he opened the doors to the gym, the first thing that I saw was two people in the ring. One's name was Alex Buckler, and the other guy's name was Adam. I remember watching them spar each other, and I thought, "Oh my God, look at this. Two guys going head to head, and nobody's stopping it. There's no one stopping the fight. This is incredible. This is right up my alley. This is exactly what I want to do." So, now I'm fascinated. I'm looking around the gym. I can see these posters. I can see these speed balls and floor to ceilings and bags. I'm like, wow, man, people are skipping. And I'm like, wow, this is this is incredible. This is unbelievable. And right in that moment, as a 12-year-old, I saw my whole destiny in front of me. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. It was an like it was an overnight obsession, like a obsession. So, and then I had this amazing teacher, Mrs. Chetty, who was bought these boxing magazines. And now I'm learning about the fighters and what it takes to be a fighter and a champion. And so the vision became so clear that boxing was what I wanted to do. That's all I spoke about. The consistency was on point because all I did was train, run, do well at school so that I can get the results so that I can go to boxing. I was never dropping the ball, I was on the mark. I loved it. And then eventually, I'd start fighting as an amateur and then, I start standing out. And my first fight, I walked to the ring with a robe that said Bilal Muhammad Ali Dib. And the trainer was like, mate, you can't be wearing a robe that says Muhammad Ali on it. And I said, listen, I could do whatever I want. And he goes, mate, no, you can't. He goes, that's just brash. And I said, but my name is Bilal Muhammad Ali Dib. He said, oh, mate, come on, mate. I said, listen, my dad's name is Muhammad Ali. My second name is Muhammad Ali, Bilal Muhammad Ali Dib. Do you want me to show you my birth certificate? He goes, yes. So I showed him my birth certificate. He goes, all right, no problem. He goes, but I still don't think it's a good idea. I said, I do. This is who I am. I'm representing me. This is my name. And that's how it all started. You know what? It was like I was brash. I was outspoken as a young boy. I was the type of person I would tell each and every person that I saw, hey, listen, I'm going to be champion of the world one day. And I tell kids today when I visit schools, the belief starts with you. If you don't believe in yourself, who's going to believe in you? Some people looked at it as brash and cocky, but for me, it was like, no, I need to let you know what I'm going to do. Whether you believe it or not, I'm going to do it. I'm going to arrive at that point one day. And I told the story at schools all the time. The trainer, one of the trainers who helped get me to my second world championship was Billy Hussein. And Billy Hussein, I was on a bus when I was 14. I've got the greatest memory of all times. Talal. I'm blessed with that. Thank God. Alhamdulillah. When I was 14, I was on a bus on the way to Canberra. And Billy Hussein, he said to me directly to my face, you'll never be a world champion. And I said, why is that? He said, because my brothers who have been in the game for so long haven't even become champions yet. What makes you think you're going to become a champion? And I said, well, listen, I need to tell you something. I'm cut from a different cloth. And I can guarantee you that what you've just said now is only going to spur me on to win the world title, and I'm going to do it. And so when I won my second world championship with him, I remember walking into the change room after being in the green room doing interviews. He had his hand in his lap like that, and I think he was pondering. And so I got the belt and I put it right underneath his face, and I said, hey, Billy, was that the belt that you said that I'd never win? And he started laughing.
You know how to rub it in, don't you?
He goes, you never forget, do you? And I said, listen, that was what spurred me on. People like you who have become my supporters, but prior to being my supporter and my trainer, you had doubts. I said, but through your training and your support, look where we are today. I am the featherweight champion of the world. Only the third Australian in the history of boxing to be a featherweight world champion.
Well, you're a two-time world champion.
I'm a two-time world champion. I've won the IBO world title, super featherweight world title, and I've won the IBF featherweight world title. But I've also won the WBC youth world title, which is a world championship for people that are under the age of 25. But it's not. It's considered a Mickey Mouse belt.
So for everybody out there listening, young kids in particular,
yeah,
what does it take to be world champion? What do you need to do?
What does it take to be a world champion? That's the most amazing question that anybody could ask me. And I'm going to tell you something, and this is a little bit dramatic. To be a world champion, to be the best in the world in anything, forget just boxing. I'm talking about soccer, rugby league, basketball, and all of the above. To be an elite athlete, to be one of the best, you need to be willing to go to a place that the opposition is not willing to go to. And let me tell you something, in a boxing ring, that could mean death. Because when you're on the brink of victory, but there's somebody who's in front of you who wants that victory just as much as you do, you've got to be willing to nearly die in there to beat that man, to outwill him, to out strength him, to out punch him, to out, like, that's just exactly what it is, a place of death. And I've been there before, I can assure you of that. To become the IBO super featherweight world champion, I stood toe to toe with a man who was literally 40 centimeters taller than me, had a reach that was incredible, and he was experienced. And to top that off, he was a southpaw, which was very awkward to deal with.
What does that mean?
Southpaw is somebody who leads with their right, and orthodox is somebody who leads with their left. So now you got a guy that's leading with his right, and you're clashing, headbutts, all these sort of things. And I can tell you that in round 9 of that fight, Johnny Lewis, who was in the corner at the time, he said to me, "Billy, nobody will question your balls if I throw the towel in right now." And I said, he goes, "Mate, you will be applauded for your heroic effort." And I said, "Don't you dare." I said, "You let me die in the ring. Don't you dare throw the towel in. I'm going to die before you throw that towel in." And I went out and I won the fight. I closed out the show. And I remember after the fight feeling like something had been broken inside me, that I had to go to a place of death to be victorious. And I felt like I'd broken something within myself to the point where I was shaking profusely. I remember they took me back to the hotel room. They should have took me back to the hospital, but they didn't. They took me back to the hotel room, and I told my mom, run a hot bath. And I was sitting in the bath and I was still shaking, but I felt like something had been broken within me. I broke something on that night in the ring within myself to be victorious, because I had spent so much time as a young boy telling people I was going to become champion. And then in the lead up to that, I'd done various TV interviews, and I was telling the interviewers and the people that were interviewing me that I will die before I leave the ring without that belt. Okay, he ain't leaving with that belt. He's not going back to South Africa with that title. That title's staying here, because I will die before he takes that. He's got to walk over my dead body. And that, when you talk like that, you better back it up. And so I had to back it up. And backing it up meant breaking something within me to win that.
What do you mean by that? What did you break?
I honestly feel like all I can explain to you is that after doing what I'd done in that fight, I was not willing to go back to that place for a long time. I was not willing to go back to that place. And I told you, you asked me the question, what does it take to be elite? And I told you that it sometimes takes going to a place of death and going to a place that the opposition is not willing to go to. And I went to that place, and it's just, how can I explain to you? It's like I went back to the gym and I felt like I wasn't myself anymore. I was the champion of the world, but I wasn't me anymore. There was something that wasn't there. Something was missing, and it took a long time for me to find it. A long time.
Take me through, as a world champion, going to places, prepared to go to places people, your opposition is not prepared to go to. What does a day in Billy Dib's life look like coming up to the fight?
As an elite athlete, as a world champion, things change, because now you have mandatories. Now you have to face the number 1 contenders. So you got people who are, you were once the hunter. Now you're being hunted. Now you're on this platform, and people are shaking the platform. They want you to fall off that platform, And the thing is, this is the truth about Australia, and I'm not embarrassed to say it. This country is built on tall poppy syndrome. This is the one and only country that's built on tall poppy syndrome. In the UK, if you're a world champion, they elevate you. They hold you on a pedestal. In this country, they want to bring you down. They lift you up to bring you down. They don't want anybody to stay at the top. And that's a really, really sad thing. And I felt that during my reign as a world champion. But the life of a world champion is, like I said to you, things things elevate, things go to another level. And now, as a champion, to become a champion, you're working extremely hard. But when you become a champion, now you got to stay at that point. Because for me, I never wanted to be a champion that just won it and lost it. I wanted to be a defending champion. I wanted to be a person who was involved in multiple championship fights, somebody who proved himself to be one of the best. And the preparations would change. You know, things change. All of a sudden, now you're in a position where you can afford to have a strength and conditioning trainer working with you full time. You can have a nutritionist working with you full time. You know, the training is a little bit different. You're now traveling and you're bringing in sparring partners. And all of a sudden, when you become a world champion, now you got to pay a sparring partner. Prior to that, people would spar with you for nothing. But now, because you're a champion, people want to get paid. So now all of a sudden, you're building an expense portfolio of sparring partners, nutrition, strength and conditioning training. So I was doing, my life, what it looked like for me in the morning was basically wake up in the morning. It was either run in the morning or box in the morning. And then during the day, it would be like strength and conditioning. And then in the evening, it would either be boxing or running again. It was one or the other. So if you ran in the morning, you'd box at night. If you boxed in the morning, you'd run at night. You know, it was full on. It was like 6 days a week. You know, depending on the body. You know, you had to listen to your body. If you felt tired, you had to take time off to let the body recover. And then sometimes there was injuries. You know, things would happen. And I remember just before I was fighting for the world title, the IBF world title, I remember being in the gym and I don't know what I was thinking, but I bought these basketball shoes. And I like the color of them. And I was like, these are gonna be perfect for the outfit that I'm gonna fight in. So I'm gonna wear these basketball shoes when I box. And it's like God didn't want me to wear them because when I was in the gym, I was sparring somebody and I slipped and I rolled my foot in the shoes, and my foot swelled so much. And I remember like thinking, oh no, I've blown it because of these stupid shoes. I've blown my opportunity. And thankfully, you know, Dr. Jamal Arif, he sorted out a few things and wrapped the foot up correctly. And you know, I put them shoes in the bin and got some natural boxing boots, you know, real boxing boots, and just went on, you know, to do that and box with them boots. But like I said to you, you know, going back to what you asked, and the question is, I don't know what was broken, but there was something that was broken, and it took a long time for me to find it.
How many hours a week would you train to get to a two-time boxing world champion, and then to maintain it? And what's the difference?
Like I said to you, the only thing that changed when I became champion was the expense sheet, because the hard work was always there, the consistency was always on point. But I would like say the way it works is that, okay, so let's just say you wake up at say 7 a.m. in the morning and you hit the road. I used to add the time that it took for me to get ready, warm down. So it was like 2 hours in the morning. You come back, you know, then when you're an elite athlete, eating becomes a job because you got to eat on time, you got to eat certain foods, you got to drink a certain amount of water. You know, you're always doing something, you know, and then you get back, eventually get to strength and conditioning. That probably goes for another 45 minutes. Then you got the warm up and then the warm down, so that's maybe an hour and a half there. And then in the evening, you go into boxing training, and that's like, you know, by the time you get ready, put your boots on, get dressed, start training, you know, it's like a 2 hour process. So I was spending anywhere from 5 hours to 5.5 hours a day in training, like just doing my thing.
6 days a week.
6 days a week.
30, 35 hours a week.
It's a job. It's a full-time job. And that's why I say, like, people say to me, fighters don't deserve to get paid the money they get paid. I said, it's a full-time job. You know what I mean? Like, oh, yeah, but you can't justify a fighter getting $20 million. Well, he's putting his life on the line, and you know he's built up a fan base, and people he deserves to be paid whatever he wants to get paid. You know what I mean? Like I remember my brother Ahmad, he was my manager, and he used to ask me, "But what do you want to get paid for this fight?" And I would say 300,000, and it's like, "Oh, we'll see how we're gonna get to that. Let's work out how we're gonna get to that," and we'd work out a plan on how to get to that point, you know. But he would ask me the question. You know, I was always very reserved with the number that I asked for, because he was like, look, just ask for a number that's a little bit reserved, and whatever we get over it is a bonus. So just don't have your expectations up here, you know. And I remember, even though I did earn $1 million a fight, I did earn that $1 million. I never earned anything above it or underneath it, but I earned 1 million. I remember there was a point before I earned that $1 million payday. I had a $750,000 payday on the table. When I was when we were talking about it, I was already spending the money in my mind about. I never got to the 750. I never got to it because I lost the fight prior to that because I was busy thinking about how I was going to spend that money.
It's about focus.
I'm telling you, man, it's like
Focus.
energy goes where the focus flows. You know what I mean? So it's like if you're not focused on the task at hand, it could slip away right away.
In the boxing world, you really got into the boxing world. I mean, from when you were 12 till very recently, you were doing a fight. Tell me about the boxing world. What happened with 50 Cent and all the drama that occurred? Because I think it's a fascinating story.
My journey in the boxing world was an amazing journey. You know, there was highs and there was lows. There was moments that I wish I could turn the clock back on, but that's just life, isn't it? You know, we all have, sometimes we have regrets, but I was originally signed to a company as a young boy called Golden Boy Promotions. Oscar De La Hoya, Shane Mosley, and Bernard Hopkins were the three names aligned to that company, and they were the three hot shots. Now, I wasn't only signed to them, I was actually living with these people at various times. I lived with Shane Mosley for many years, and he was an elite athlete at the time. You know, like an absolute phenom. I spent time with Mike Tyson. I lived with Oscar De La Hoya for like 6 weeks in Puerto Rico. So, you know, I got to experience some things that people wouldn't get the opportunity to experience. I can honestly say I don't think there's a fighter in the world that's experienced the things that I've experienced. And there's hundreds of thousands of fighters, but I don't think anyone has ever experienced what I experienced. I spent time with Mike Tyson, De La Hoya, Bernard Hopkins, Shane Mosley, Prince Nassim Hamed, Arturo Gatti. You're talking about legends of the sport. I had a gentleman once from Yahoo Sports contact me. He goes, "Mate, what is it about you? All of these elite fighters love to spend time with you." I said, "I don't know." And he goes, "Man, I'll tell you what it is." And I said, "What is it?" And he goes, "Mate, you've been kissed on the ass by an angel." He goes, "Because this just doesn't happen. This is crazy." He goes, "Mate, you're hanging out with the greatest
So
fighters."
tell me, they're all great fighters. Mike Tyson is probably the most infamous and famous. What was it like hanging out with him?
It was truly an experience that I'll never forget. It was scary at times.
Scary?
Yeah, man. Like Mike was aggressive, you know. Like Mike, when I first met Mike, yeah, it was like, I don't know. It was like trying to get water out of a stone. He was very reserved. Then eventually, when he came out of his show, when he cracked, it was like he come in an aggressive way, in a very aggressive way. You know, like get in the car, or your peoples, they did this to my team. Or like he was very aggressive in that manner. And like times I'd be like, Jeff, this guy's crazy. You know what I mean? But it was an amazing time because when the times that I spent with him, when I could actually have conversations with him, man, I was able to elicit so much information that I needed. You know, I had this thing in my head that prior to meeting Mike Tyson, like I got so many things I want to ask him, and I wrote all these questions down, and it didn't go down like that at all. You know, it was 6 weeks of fun. But you know, the craziest thing is that I actually saw him a few years ago, and he had no idea. He had no recollection of the time we spent together. I had to show him photos for him to even like sort of, you know, and he was
Did you remember?
none of it, which was sad for me because I was like, man, I wonder if he remembers. But since that point, I've seen him again, you know what I mean, which is like pretty cool because then, you know, like he sort of does now remember me, but not from the past, you know what I mean. But I did tell him, I said, listen, Mike, when I was 21 years of age, you know, we talked about a few things, and I told you that I want to be world champion one day, and I want to let you know that I went on to become a 2-time world champion. And I said, I've written an autobiography and I'd like to give you a copy of the book. And I gave it to him and I signed it. And there was a picture of me and him in the book and I signed that page. And I told him, I just want to let you know that a lot of the conversations we had influenced me in certain ways. You know, what I mean, what you went through taught me that I needed to be um, more, resilient and respectful towards my career and all of these things, that he told me during that time. It was an amazing experience.
One more. Tell me about De La Hoya.
I love De La Hoya. A lot of
Did
people,
he remember you?
yes. Let me tell you, De La Hoya, me and him, I would say, I don't have like a, call him all the time or whatever. Like, but if I rang him, I know that he'd answer the phone. I don't bother him. But I remember just at the start of this year at the Ring Magazine Awards when I was given the award and the accolade of Comeback Fighter of the Year. I remember being in the hotel room and I saw Eric Gomez, who was the CEO and the best friend of Oscar De La Hoya, and I was like, "Tell me Oscar's here." And he's like, "He's here, man." And I'm like, "Where is he?" He's like, "He's around the corner. Go and see him." And I was like, I remember just as soon as I entered the room, as soon as he saw me, he got up out of his seat right away and he ran up to me and he hugged me and he goes, "Man, I prayed for you. I prayed so hard for you, man." And I was like, "You wouldn't believe it, Oscar." I said, all I wanted to do during that time was speak to you because I knew because his mum had been through something very similar to me and she had lost her life. And I wanted to speak to him about it. And I said, I tried to message you on Instagram and that, and I couldn't get you. And he goes, "Forget all that. Take my phone number right now." And he gave me his direct line and, like the relationship that I share with him. And even when I became the IBF World Champion, the first person to tweet congratulations was Oscar De La Hoya.
Wow.
And that for me, that's massive. To have a legend like that.
So the first person to tweet.
The first person to tweet congratulations was Oscar De La Hoya.
Wow.
And I used to be signed to his company. And when I lost my first professional fight against Stephen Loeveno, they gave me an option to stay in the company, but to take a hard fight or to get a release and move on and go do my own thing. And I opted to take the release, but I always kept the doors of communication open with them. I've never been a when you burn your bridges, that's never me. If I worked with you, I'll always keep that bridge there. I never burn the bridge. I always keep it respectful, never say a bad word about the company, nothing. And I always kept it very respectful. Me and Oscar have always shared that relationship. And the amount of love that he showed me at the Ring Magazine Awards was like incredible. Honestly, like the advice and the conversations we shared, things that I'm going to take with me to the later stages of my life. I mean, Oscar's a phenom in regards to boxing success. What he's achieved in boxing financially, not many people achieve. I'm talking in the hundreds of millions of dollars. And he runs one of the most successful promotional companies now, and he does a lot of funny things on social media, but to me, that's all just promotion.
Tell me the story about 50 Cent and you.
That was a really good moment in my life. I remember when it all sort of came to fruition, how it all happened. I was actually in a fight against a guy called Juan Rodriguez, and it was a tough fight. And I remember my brother Ahmed coming to the corner, which is very strange, but he says, "Win this fight because I've got some very big news for you." And I was like, I don't plan on doing anything but that anyway. And we got the win, and then he sort of, after the fight, he was very like elusive. I was like, "Man, tell me what's going on." He's like, "Go on your holiday. When you come back, we'll sort it out." I was on a holiday with Prince Nassim Ahmed in Dubai, and my brother Ahmed rang me and he said, "I need you to get on a plane from Dubai and go to Vegas." And I was like, "I'm not going to do that. I'm not going from Dubai to Vegas." I said, you told me to enjoy my holiday. What's going on? He said, "Listen, have you heard anything about TMT Promotions?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's Floyd Mayweather, the money team." He's like, "Yeah, Floyd Mayweather and 50 Cent have merged and they want to sign you to their company." And I'll tell you the craziest thing was in 2006, I fought on the undercard of Oscar De La Hoya versus Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather after the fight, I was waiting outside of De La Hoya's change rooms, and he was walking into the change room with 50 Cent, and he stopped the camera that was following him and said, "Listen, this is the future of boxing right here." And he pointed at me. Oh, me. And he's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I just watched you on the monitor in my room." He goes, "I love your movement. You're very elusive. The way you box is incredible." He's like, "I love your eyes." And I was like, "Thank you." He's like, "You're going to be champ one day." I was like, "How much time have you got left on your contract with Golden Boy?" And I was like, "A couple of years." He goes, "Yeah, we'll be in touch." That's what he said. 2011, after I won the IBF featherweight world title, I took my cousin Ahmed on a holiday to Las Vegas. Floyd Mayweather was fighting Victor Ortiz during the time that we were there. We never went to the fight, but we went to the grand arrivals, and Floyd spotted me. And my friend, baby Pete Mitrevsky, said to Floyd, "Billy's now the IBF featherweight champion of the world." And he goes, "We're going to call you soon. We're going to be in touch." He goes, "You signed to anyone?" I said, "I'm a free agent." He goes, "I'll be in touch." And I was like, "You don't have my phone number?" He's like, "I'll get it. Don't worry." And because he was busy, so he left. So this all came to fruition through that. And so then I win the fight, go to Dubai, have a holiday with Nas, and then all of a sudden now I'm on a plane back to Australia, landing the following day. I'm getting back on a plane going to Vegas.
How old were you at this stage?
26. So when we get to Vegas, my brother Emad and I, Floyd Mayweather has been incarcerated for domestic violence. So if you look up, he's been now incarcerated for bashing, I think, one of his girlfriends or something like that. And so now 50 Cent has been left to put the deal together himself. And so I get to Vegas. I'm really tired because of the jet lag and everything. So I go to sleep. And then my brother Emad wakes me up and says, "Listen, 50's going to meet us downstairs in the lobby in about 20 minutes. So I go downstairs, and then I see 50 Cent. And the first thing that I asked him was, "Do you remember me?" And he's like, "I do." And I'm like, "Tell me." And he's like, "I met you in 2006 outside of Oscar De La Hoya's change room, and Floyd was telling me that you're going to be one of the top fighters." He goes, "I remember him talking to you." And I said, "So you remember me?" He's like, "I remember you. Of course I do." He goes, "We've been keeping an eye out on you for a long time." And that was the end of it. We got in the car. I was in a Lamborghini. My brother Emad was behind me in a Rolls Royce. He took us out for dinner, and then I thought we were going to do the deal on that night. He's like, "We'll talk business tomorrow. I just wanted to take you guys out, show you guys a good time." Went out, we had dinner, come back home. The next day, we catch up with him, put together a life-changing deal. 9-fight, $3 million deal with 50 Cent and Floyd Mayweather on TMT. He gave me a $100,000 bonus in cash, and basically I come home and everything seems to be on an amazing high. Like, I'm this young kid from Australia who's now been signed to Golden Boy Promotions. Now he's been signed to a company that's going to be taking over the sport of boxing with Al Heyman, with Floyd Mayweather, 50 Cent. It's TMT Promotions. He signs me, Gamboa, Anthony Durrell, guys who are like amazing fighters, James Kirkland. And just as everything seems to be going amazing, I get a phone call from a lawyer saying, "My name is Gary Suku. I am an attorney for Floyd Mayweather, and I'm going to need you to make a decision whether you're going to go with Floyd Mayweather or with 50 Cent." And I was like, "What's going on?" He's like, "They're parting ways. They've had a bit of an altercation, and now they're splitting." And I was like, "Man, I'm going with Floyd." And he's like, "Well, that's a smart decision." I said, "Absolutely. I'm not going with 50 Cent. Why would He's a musician. I'm going with the man that knows boxing, you know?" And so I then get a phone call the following day from 50 Cent, and he says, "Billy, trust me, you don't want to go with Floyd. He's all about himself. You know, I'm going to forge this company, SMS Boxing Promotions." He goes, "I got an idea. We'll come to Australia. We'll do big shows." He goes, "I'll do concerts/boxing events." He goes, "So could you imagine you'll be the sole boxing fighter on the night, and I'll do a whole concert around it." He goes, "You'll get paid the money that you deserve." So I start thinking, well, that sounds like a good idea. Then Floyd Mayweather rings me, and I'm on the phone with Floyd, and I'm getting pulled left, right, and center. And then in the end, I made a decision. Nah, I'm going with Floyd. I got to go with Floyd. Then Floyd says to me, "You're gonna need to give 50 the money back that he gave you, the 100,000." And I was like, "I'm in a bit of a situation, Floyd. I don't have the money anymore." He's like, "What do you mean?" I said, "I put the money in a long-term deposit. I can't touch it. It's basically locked away, and I can't get it." And he's like, "Oh, you're gonna need to find a way to get it to Floyd." I was like, "Listen, can you just give 50 the 100 grand? It's no big deal." And he's like, "No, we got to renegotiate the deal." As soon as he said renegotiate the deal, I envisioned that he wanted to change the whole $3 million deal. And as I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I'm just going to go with 50." And that was it. So I left, I went on with 50, and then 50 thought he was being clever by trolling Floyd online on Twitter. And so 50 Cent lines up an amazing fight for me in New York at Madison Square Garden on the undercard of Miguel Cotto versus Austin Trout. And I'm fighting a guy by the name of Jason Velez. And this is a very, very winnable fight. It's gonna be like my fourth defense of the title. And then 50 gets online and he's basically trolling Floyd. And then Floyd rings Showtime and says, "Listen, if you work with Billy Dib, I'm out. You guys can tear up our contract. I'm out." And so then Showtime basically blacklisted me. I couldn't fight on Showtime. They put an X on me and said, "No, we can't work with anybody who 50 Cent's working with. We can't work with them because that's bad for business." And so then, Floyd Mayweather basically destroyed my career from that point. My choice to go with 50 Cent, just due to the whole situation between them, like their feud destroyed my boxing career.
So your collateral damage, basically.
Yeah. So basically, I will tell you, from the point of that, I began to hate boxing. The love of boxing left me at that point. I hated boxing with all of my heart. I was only doing it because that's all I knew what to do. If I could have just stopped my career right there and found something else to do, I probably would have done it. But I thought, what else am I going to do? This is all I know. Boxing is all I know. And 50 Cent was like, "Don't worry, we'll work it all out," and all these things. And then in the end, 50 Cent ended up robbing me for $1.1 million Australian, US, which is at the time. So when I say I signed a $3 million deal, it was 3 million Australian. I signed a $3 million Australian deal. He robbed me for 1.7 Australian dollars. He just didn't pay. He liquidated the company, and I got numerous phone calls from numerous lawyers in America saying, "Look, we can sue him," and all these things. And I was like, my Adam Huda told me, "You're not going to sue him, and you're not going to achieve anything out of suing him." He goes, "Because he's liquidated the company, so we can only sue that entity. We can't sue 50 Cent. We can sue SMS Promotions, and SMS Promotions has no money. So you're going to fork out all this money trying to sue this guy. You're going to get nothing. All of these lawyers that are telling you in America, let's sue him and all these things, all they're doing is for profiling. That's all it is."
So 50 Cent worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, and
why would he rip you off for 1.7 million Aussie?
I'm going to be honest with you, because people like him, they don't like to have you have one over them. It's very, very simple. I spent a lot of time with these type of guys. I was around the elite of their kind, you know what I mean? And the thing is that they never want to let you have one over them. You're not that's like, they can't live that down. Even though for him to sign a check for $1.7 million is not going to hurt him. He probably makes that in interest, monthly or whatever it is. And he could have just given it to me, but and I told him, I said, 50, this is money that'll change my life and I need it. And he's like, "No."
But you went with him.
I know.
And Floyd Mayweather
But he
came after you.
Yeah, but the thing is, I actually got on a plane and I flew to Vegas to spend some time with trying to locate Floyd, like I had his phone number, but he was just hard to pin down. But one night I was out and I saw him out and I was like, "Man, I need to talk to you." And he's like, "All right." I said, "Floyd, like, I really need to talk to you. I got some really bad things going on in my life and I need to talk to you." He's like, "Come to my gym tomorrow." I went to his gym the following day. I was at the gym from like 2 o'clock till like 10 o'clock at night, and he still hadn't spoken to me. Then he made me go to his house, and all for a 20-minute conversation. And I basically said to him, "Listen, your name is on my contract. 50 Cent has done such and such," and he's like, "Get a release, and I'll sign you to TNT Promotions." And I was like, I don't know why, but something in my heart said, "Don't believe the guy." And so I tried to bluff him, and I did, and it worked. And then he said to me, "Oh, I'm not going to sign you, but I'm just going to give you a fight by fight basis." And so then I was lucky that I didn't tell 50 that I wanted out of the contract, because I would have got nothing. He gave me $50,000 US. That was what he put in my account when I told him that I needed the money. He put 50,000 and then liquidated the company. So, but you know, the thing about that story is that I don't tell you the story because I'm bitter. I'm not bitter anymore. I let that go a long time ago. And I tell you, my mom, she told me because when all this was going on, Sarah, who I was married to at the time, was dying from cancer. And my mom told me, my mom thought I was upset about the money. I wasn't upset about the money. I was upset about what was going on with Sarah. But obviously the money was bothering me a little bit. But my mom said to me, one day that money's going to find you. She goes, that money's going to find you. It's going to come back to you. And then years later, I get a phone call from Amir Khan. All the pieces of the puzzle come together, and I go to Saudi Arabia to fight Amir Khan for $1 million. The money came back. It just had to come back through a fight, you know what I mean? But this was a fight that I was never going to get, because when Amir rang me, it was about fighting as the undercard for $50,000. He offered me 50,000. The purse turned from 50,000 fighting some guy from Indonesia to then fighting Amir Khan for $1 million. Life-changing money.
You can plan, I can plan, but Allah is the best of planners.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, Sarah.
Yeah.
And your journeys plural with
Cancer. Yeah.
And the effect it has. Can you talk to me about Sarah, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
About what happened? You've been married 6 weeks.
Yeah. No. So Sarah and I, we met when she was very, very young. I had no intentions of ever marrying Sarah, ever. My sister was engaged to Sarah's uncle. It didn't work out. We remained friends with the family. Sarah was 11 years old, and her mum asked me if she could do an assignment on me. There was a 9-year gap between Sarah and I. So Sarah's 11, I'm 20, and I'm helping her with this assignment, right? And that was the end of it. I never saw her again after that. We finished the assignment. They were doing an assignment on people who were famous. And I wasn't like super famous or anything. I was getting there, but I wasn't. But they were interested in doing it on me. And so years later, I get a phone call from a relative of mine saying, "Hey, listen, I got the perfect wife for you." And I was like, "Who is it?" And she's like, "You remember Sarah Slim?" And I'm like, "She's a kid. Is she like 13 years old?" And she's like, "No, she's 19 and she's really stunning." Or at the time, I'm like, as I said, there's a 9-year gap, and I'm like, mate, it's not gonna work. I said, they're not gonna be interested in me. She goes, I wouldn't be asking if they weren't asking me. And so things just came together. You know what I mean? I met her, and she was amazing and lovely person and good human. Came from a great family, and things just rolled on quick. And then eventually we set a date for December the 5th, 2015 to get married. She's then diagnosed with cancer earlier in the year, and I told her that we needed to get married because I didn't want to be around her in the hospital with a chaperone. You know, I was obviously Islamically, we need a chaperone. I was like, I'm not doing that. I said, we're going to get married. Later on, after you get better, we'll have another big wedding and that. But for now, we're going to get married. We're going to do a katbik tab and we're going to get married. And so that was it. I married her through doing a katbik tab. We had a ceremonial wedding at our home. It was nice. Family came. It was a very intimate get together. And then she passed away 2 months and 10 days later. The cancer was very aggressive. she died from the chemotherapy, not from the cancer. So her hematologist basically said to her there was three things that could happen: pancreas failure, heart failure, or blood clots. And unfortunately for Sarah, she ended up with a blood clot right in the center of her brain, and then basically it killed her. Yeah, she succumbed to it, and Allah had got better plans for her. And but then ever in your life, imagine that you meet somebody who is married, and the wife gets cancer, and then years later, her husband would get cancer. Like,
So before we move on there, how did that impact you at the time?
uh,
How did you cope? How did you deal with your...
I'll tell you something. Sarah's death was um a very bitter pill to swallow, and I would say that I made a lot of mistakes, and the biggest mistake that I made was not asking for help. That was my biggest mistake. Wasn't saying that, hey, help me, because I'm a world champion boxer. I can't be asking for help. I'm supposed to be helping people. I'm supposed to be inspiring other people. I wasn't in, like people would ring me and they would be sympathetic, and I hated the sympathy. So I just told them, yeah, I'm fine. I'm totally fine. It's all good. But deep down, I wasn't fine. But I was fighting it and making several mistakes. And, it wasn't until that I actually asked for help and got the help that I actually began to heal. And that's something that I teach young people today, is that it's only through asking and letting people know that you will heal. That if you have a problem and you're trying to resolve this problem by yourself, it will never work. We need to be able to ask people for help. We need to be able to feel comfortable to say, listen, I'm in a bit of a situation. Can you help me? Because I'm in a dark place and I don't know what to do. So I just feel that, that's the mistakes that I made. And now as an adult, I'm trying to teach people not to make the mistakes. That they say, learn from other people's mistakes. I'm trying to allow people to learn from the mistakes that I made.
And how did you get over such a bitter pill?
You never get over it. I'm gonna be open and honest. You never get over it. You always, a part of you always holds on to that. But Allah is the most merciful, and just look at what God's given me. After all that, I have the most amazing wife in my wife Berry. I have the most beautiful son in my son Laith, and I wouldn't change that for anything. To if you were to tell me there was a way that you could take me back to that and change the course of the way it went, I will tell you no. I'm staying exactly where I am, because to be honest with you, I'm so infatuated with my wife now and my son that I couldn't have it any other way. Like God has allowed me to heal and to come back with a vengeance.
So how do you deal with the death and the bitter pill? And then obviously you got remarried to Berry and you have Laith. But when it comes to you, talk me what happened and how you discovered you had cancer, and tell me the story.
I was at the top of my game again. I was coming off a really good win via disqualification against a guy called Jacob NG. I was back in the world ratings and on the verge of another major opportunity. And then one day in the gym, really strangely, Billy Hussein said, today we're doing body sparring. And that wasn't like him. That was like never like him. And so we start opening up on these body shots, hitting each other really hard. A friend of mine named Billy Dib as well, he hits me in the right side of my colon area, and I felt this excruciating pain. It was debilitating. And I was like, I think you've just tore something in my stomach. And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, something in my stomach. It's like, it feels like you've torn it. And I went home and dealt with the pain for the day. Then the next day, I went to the gym and I was skipping. And I remember while I was skipping, I was like, oh, this pain is like really bad. So I sat down and I was like, told the trainer, I'm like, look, man, I don't know what's going on, but there's something not right. And I went home, and my wife was taking my son to swimming lessons, and I didn't want to alarm her, but I said, listen, I'm not doing this to alarm you. I said, but I am going to go to the hospital. She says, what for? And I'm like, there's something wrong with my stomach, and I'm going to call the ambulance. And she's like, oh, no. Okay, listen, there's nothing you can do. What are you going to do? Come sit at the hospital? Just cater to our son. Go about your day. Let me go to the hospital. I went to the hospital, and it was the most horrific experience. I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy. I was treated like second class. I don't know what the hell was going on. I was like, listen, there is something wrong with my stomach. I feel like I'm going to die. Please help me. And they're like, maybe you've got COVID. And I'm like, maybe I've got COVID? Do I look like I have COVID? Are you joking right now? Sir, can you stop being aggressive? I said, listen to me right now. There is something wrong with me, and I am going to die if you don't help me. And please help me. And nurse after nurse would walk past me while I'm waiting in this room. And in the end, I said, you know what? I can't take this anymore. There was one of those things where they put the cannula. I picked it up and I smashed it on the floor as hard as I could. It burst into pieces. And the lady came out, and I said, listen, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you value your life? And she said, yes. I said, I value mine. If you don't help me right now, I'm going to kill you right now, and the police will not get here before you're dead. You going to help me? She said, I'm going to help you. I said, you better help me now. She took me into a room. I'm telling you, that's how it was. But that's not me, but I was going to die, Talal. You know, I was feeling, I don't know what I was feeling, but I was going to die. And she stabbed me with this pen. It was just, she gave me morphine. And I was like, I felt this like hot flush come over my head. And I was like, and I just felt like high, right? And then she asked me if I wanted more. And I was like, no more. And I don't know, it was like something like 6 hours later, I finally snapped out of it, but the pain was gone, completely gone. I felt no more pain. And they said, oh, look, we've run a few tests. We couldn't find anything, you know, you could go home if you want. So I rang my brother, and I said to him, can you pick me up from Bankstown Hospital? And he goes, yeah. So then he gets to Bankstown Hospital, and he rings me. He says, Bill, are you at Bankstown Hospital? I was like, yeah. And he's like, I'm outside. I said, I'm outside too. And he's like, but are you sure you're at Bankstown Hospital? And I walked back in, and I said to the doctor, I said, where am I? I said, you're at Canterbury Hospital. And I told him to just go home. I called an Uber home. Later in that night, I hadn't eaten all day. So the pain comes when you eat. And so my mom offered me something to eat. I started to eat what my mom offered me, and the pain came back tenfold. Next morning, I don't know how I made it through that night. I made it through that night with some like endone and things like that I had at home. I remember getting to my mom's house because I said to my wife, I said, listen, I think I'm going to die. Take me to my mom and dad's house, please. I need to see my mom. So my wife took me there, and my mom says to me, maybe you've caught wind. You know how parents say you've got magas? And I go, Mom, please don't do that. And then I was so infuriated by what she said. I slammed the door, and when I slammed the door slammed back open, and smashed me in the knee. I was on the floor begging for mercy. My knee was killing me. And then the phone rings, and it was my brother Mohammed. And he said, why were you in hospital yesterday? I said, no, forget that. Help me. I'm going to die. Help me, please. Started crying on the phone, and he goes, bro, what's going on? What are you talking about? He said, listen, stay on the line for 1 second. Stay on the line. He rang a doctor named Dr. Pran. The absolute godsend. Dr. Pran is a doctor, is a cancer doctor for stomach cancer. And I explained to him what was going on. I said, please don't hang up on me because I'm not lying to you. And he goes, champ, you've experienced enormous amounts of pain. He goes, if you're telling me this is going to kill you, then you're telling me the truth. So I need you to do something for me. He goes, get in the car right now and go to Norwest Private Hospital. When I got to the hospital, again, I was in so much pain, on so much meds from what I had taken at home. when I got to the counter, I said, I'm Billy the Kid. And he told me to tell them that you're Dr. Pran's patient. And I got to the counter, I said, I'm Billy the Kid. I said, hi, Billy the Kid, can you fill out this form? And I said, no, I'm Billy the Kid. Yes, I understand, but could you fill out this form? And I fill out the form, something happens, I end up passing out. I passed out because I went outside to be sick and I passed out. And then a bunch of doctors were around me while I was on the floor. And I finally got up and I don't know what happened. I woke up and I was in the emergency ward. And Dr. Sanjay was the doctor that was Dr. Sanjay. He asked me a question. He said, what's wrong? And I said, there's something growing in my stomach. And I said, I don't know what you've given me because I can't feel it right now, but there is something growing in my stomach. Please believe me. He goes, what we're going to do is we're going to flush your system out. And tomorrow we're going to send you in to do a scan in the morning, early in the morning. Made it through that night. I don't know how I made it through that night. I'm telling you, Talal, I remember saying, Ya Rob, if you've opened up a place for me in heaven, take me now because I can't take this anymore. Or please send somebody to help me. When the person came to help me, because God sends, when you ask, God sends. This nurse says to me, I can help you, but you got to help me help you. And I said, what do you do? He goes, you need to swallow this tube. And I go, I can't do it. He goes, you want me to save your life? Do what I'm telling you. I'm going to bring 2 nurses. But he left, came back with 2 other nurses. He goes, this nurse, I want you to grab her hand, squeeze it as tight as you have to squeeze it. And the other nurse is going to hold the cup. When I told you to drink, you got to drink. He put a tube up my nose to go down my throat. I've never felt pain like that in my life, ever. I was choking, and only through sipping the water was I able to swallow the tube. When I swallowed the tube, he basically relieved me through pumping whatever was in my stomach out. And then the next day, they ran this test, and they found that, yes, I had colon cancer. They found a 9-centimeter tumor in my colon area that had been ruptured from the punch.
9 centimeters.
9 centimeters. They removed it. I spent a few days in hospital. Then they sent me home. They said to me, you're cancer-free, but we recommend you do a bit of chemotherapy just to clean up what's around. And I said, I'm not doing no chemotherapy. I'm going home. That was it. And I went home. And Friday to Friday, I was back in the hospital fighting for my life. The cancer had spread so bad, I was basically riddled with the cancer. And when my wife rang them back and said, listen, there's something wrong with him, the doctor says, I think we've made a major mistake. Bring him back. He says, we got to work out what cancer he has, but it did start with colon, but now it's spread. And yeah, basically they told me that you had non-Hodgkin's Burkitt lymphoma cancer, a very, very aggressive cancer, fast, rapid growing, but very treatable is what they told me. Anyway, when the doctor turned up and told me that, basically you're going to be dead in 6 months, because he knew that I wasn't keen on the chemotherapy. And I told him, I said, I'm going to look for some other remedies. He said, listen, during the time that you look for these other remedies, by the time you come back and tell me you're ready to start chemotherapy, because you will want to do that, he goes, it'll be too late. I can't save you. He goes, now I have a chance to save you. There's a 70 or 80% chance that you will live. And then I said to him, I can't die. And he goes, why? And I said, look, man, I got a son who's on the verge of turning 3. In 2 years' time, I got to walk my son to school. I can't die. And he goes, you just found the greatest Y factor. He goes, if that's your reason to fight, let's go. And I said, right, I'm ready to go. And he goes, just like that? And I go, that's not about me anymore. It's about my wife, my son. It's about my family, my friends, my fans. I said, I can't let them down. I can't just be a quitter. So what do you need me to do? He goes, I need to transfer you to another hospital tonight. I went from this luxury hospital at Norwest Private Hospital to Westmead, which was like being in a war zone. And that was where the journey started. And I'll tell you, it was the most horrific journey that I've ever been in my life. Like, I've never, ever experienced pain like chemotherapy. I surrendered myself to the idea of living. I surrendered thinking that this was it. You know what I mean? I made a decision that the only way that I was going to survive this was if God allowed for me to survive. That's it. Because what I was going through was absolutely horrific. It was excruciating pain. It was bone crushing pain. That's what it was. That's the only way I can describe it to you. Bone crushing pain. And on multiple times, I prayed to God and asked Him to take me. I'm telling you, multiple times. And each and every single time, 3 times during my hospital stay that I asked God to take me, He sent a nurse to help me. And the nurse would always rectify. And I'd always ask him, why don't you give me this stuff before I ask? And they're like, we can only give you when you tell us what's going on. If you don't ask, we can't give. And I was like, but it's just, I don't understand. You understand I've got these ulcers in my throat. I can't swallow. I'm dying. I'm losing weight. I walked into the hospital at 68 kilograms. I walked out at 56 after 6 weeks. After 6 weeks, I went from 68 to 56. I was a corpse. You know, I was like a dead man walking. But I had to go home. I negotiated time out. I needed to go home. I needed to see my son because I thought that this was the end. But through perseverance, through everything that I ever learned in the boxing ring about being resilient, never giving up, I was able to overcome this invisible opponent that I couldn't see. It was mono on mono against an opponent that was invisible. And I was 100% determined to overcome him.
Have you rung the bell?
Have I rung the bell at the hospital?
The cancer-free bell?
No. They told me I got to wait 5 years.
How many years in are we?
2 years.
3 years to go.
3 years to go. But I will tell you this. You remember how I told you I was very, very bitter with boxing? And I hated boxing? I don't hate boxing anymore. And I'm going to tell you why. Because when I was deemed in remission, I had this thing talking to me in the head saying, what if you had a comeback fight? Could you imagine you come back and fought? Imagine what the people would say. Well, you know, so I started getting this thought in my head. Then I go to, I'm in Uzbekistan and I'm with Mauricio Suleiman and I talking to this other guy, Robert Diaz. And then Robert says, man, could you imagine you had a comeback fight? And I was like, have you just read my mind? Because I've been thinking that. And then Mauricio Suleiman was like, absolutely not. We'd never sanction that. No way, no order. And I was like, what if I could get a clearance? What if I could show you that I'm back? What if I could go back to the gym and show you that I'm within my faculties and I could do it? And he said, if you can show me that, I'll consider it. And so for months on end, I would send him videos of me training. And one day the penny dropped and I sent him an amazing sparring session where I looked phenomenal. And he was like, you look really good. And I was like, can we do it? He's like, if you want to do it, we'll do it just for you. And so I got the clearance from the doctors, my hematologist. I told the hematologist, don't tell my dad or my mum, because this is a secret between you and me and a few other people. And so then I told my siblings and my mum and dad that I was going to have an exhibition fight at the WBC convention to help out the convention. And it's a major event. And I went over there and had this fight secretly. I prepared for it in secret. I didn't tell anybody. And then just before leaving to go to Germany, Jamie Pandaren from the Daily Telegraph said that he wants to do an article on me. And the article comes out that this is going to be a fight. And now I'm having to tell lies. No, it's not a fight. It's just an exhibition. It's a misprint and whatever. And I go over there. And
They misquoted me.
Yeah.
They misquoted me.
I went over there and had this fight. But when I tell you that, you know, have you ever heard the saying, you don't get your flowers until you die? Have you ever heard that saying?
No.
Well, athletes never get their flowers until they die. I'll give you an example. Muhammad Ali, he dies, he gets his flowers. George Foreman, he dies, he gets his flowers. Joe Bugner recently died, now he gets his flowers. Well, I got my flowers before I even died. When I was at that event, the likes of Lennox Lewis was there, Michael Mora, Amir Khan, all of these amazing fighters were at the convention and they watched me fight. Then, to top it off, after I've gotten my flowers from that event and I'm feeling like $1 million and I'm on top of the world, I've beaten cancer, boxing didn't retire me, I retired on my own, you know. Boxing never retired me. Cancer never retired me. I left on my own note. You know what I mean? It was my choice to leave, not theirs. My choice. And so then I finally get home, and then in the first week of January, I get an invitation by Turkey or Sheikh, who's taken over the world of sports, to come to London for the Ring Magazine Awards. You've been nominated for Comeback Fighter of the Year. And I'm thinking to myself, this just can't get any better. I'm not probably going to get it, but the fact that I've been invited, I'm going to be around all of these amazing athletes. So I get to London. I take my brother Muhammad with us. I forfeit a first-class flight in order to bring my brother Muhammad with me in 2 business-class flights, but I don't care because I want my brother with me. We get to London, and I have all of these amazing champions there. Like, I'm talking like the best of the best of the best. They're all there. My Lennox Lewis, Evander Holyfield, Alexander Usyk, Canelo Alvarez, all of the elite fighters are there. Every one of them. And then everybody's talking about this Comeback of the Year award. And everyone's like, there's no one that's going to get it besides Billy Dib. So that's the rumor going around while we're there for the week. And we're at this event, and then Ryan Garcia is invited out to give the award. He opens up the awards. He mentions who the people that have been nominated. They do like a little video. When my video comes up, everybody starts clapping and whistling and everything like that. So now I'm getting like a bit nervous. Like I'm thinking this could be me. And then Ryan Garcia opens up the envelope and he goes, the winner of Comeback of the Year is Billy Dib. And I walk from the middle of the auditorium, right about there, all the way to the front, and everybody stands up and claps me all the way to the stage. I'm getting hugged and tapped on the back, and yes, champ, you're the best, and well, you know what I mean? Oscar De La Hoya gives me a big hug, Alexander Usyk, all these people, and then I get up on the stage and deliver this unbelievable speech. It was like dropping the mic on boxing and just walking out on my own terms. And again, I got applauded all the way back to my chair. The most incredible farewell ever given. Unbelievable. And I'll tell you something. God put me through everything that he put me through, the cancer journey and all, because he knew what I wanted, and boxing finally gave me what I wanted. I finally got the accolades that I deserve.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What's next for Billy Dib?
What's next for Billy Dib is, there's a lot going on for Billy Dib. You know what I mean? It's very exciting. At the time, I've actually just finished writing this amazing kids book, which is going to be a complete game changer. This is called Boys Can Cry and Billy Dib Does Too. And this is about empowering young kids to know that it's okay to express themselves. It's okay to ask for help. This is based on true stories, things that happened to me during the course of my life. And right now, I've had enormous amounts of success. This book is not just backed by me, it's backed by the WBC. It's backed by Turkey or Sheikh and Riyadh season. This book is in print at the moment. It's been printed in English, Arabic, Spanish, Malaysian, Indonesian. This is going to be a worldwide phenomenon, this book. This book is a book about changing the perception of the way children are spoken to. And this all came to fruition through things that have happened to me. But when I beat cancer, I remember being at my mother and father's house, and my brother-in-law said to my son, stop crying like a girl. And I said, don't you ever say that to my son again. That was so damaging to me as a young boy. That damaged me in a way that you'll never understand. It was, to me, what it did to me as a kid, it robbed me of the ability to express myself. Through somebody told me, don't cry like a little girl. You're supposed to be champion of the world one day. How dare you cry like a little girl? You stop it. And I was like, man, I'm going to be champ. I can't cry. So I'd lose fights. I'd never cry. I'd fall over and hurt myself. I'd never cry because I'm going to be champ. The champ can't cry. But then I got older and I realized that champs do cry. And I seen them cry. I seen champs cry. I seen De La Hoya and Mosley's and Mike Tyson, and all of them shed tears. So evidently champions do cry.
They do indeed. I will help you with the book, and inshallah everybody can, excuse me, learn something from Boys Can Cry.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they definitely will.
I'm sure they will. Let me ask you some final questions. These are quick, light ones,
Yes.
since we covered very, light topics just then. What's a misconception that people have about Billy Dib?
I'm going to definitely say this, and you know what, some people are probably going to get mad at me for saying this because they like me to play that card, but the misconception is that people think that I'm a multi-zillionaire or something like that. People have this idea that Billy Dib is so wealthy because of the boxing career that he had, but it's not true. Honestly, it is not true. Yes, I made great money, but I didn't make what people think they made that I made. You know, people treat me in a way where they think I've made billions and billions of dollars from boxing. It was just not true. I didn't.
What's your guilty pleasure
My guilty pleasure.
that you can admit
Yeah.
on a podcast?
No. Listen, I would definitely say that I'm a massive lolly junkie. I love lollies. Like during the course of my career, I'd always be sneaking lollies into training camp. I remember being in a training camp, and I don't know what I was doing, but I was in the kitchen area and I found this bag of lollies, and I was like, "Oh my God, who left these here?"
God sent them.
I took them and I put them in my room, and I said, "No one's gonna get them. I'm just gonna pick at them every single day." You know, I'm telling you, I definitely probably had weight problems because of the lollies that I used to eat for sure.
You say to the coach, I don't know what happened.
I don't know I didn't make weight. What happened?
What's the one thing that, family aside, that Billy Dib can't live without?
The one thing that I can't live without is definitely boxing. Definitely, I love boxing. I really, like there was a long time where I was very bitter with the sport, but now I love the sport so much. The energy to give back and the energy to be involved in the sport to some extent is there, definitely there.
Billy Dib now, how old are you now? 30?
40.
40.
40.
Sees the 21-year-old Billy Dib,
Mm.
top of his game, getting there. Walking out of a change room, and you can whisper one thing to him, what would you whisper?
Hold on, the journey's going to be amazing. I'd tell him, hold on, and the journey's going to be amazing. It's going to be a roller coaster, but don't worry. You're going to get to what you want to get to.
Billy Dib, thank you for coming on Uncommon Ground.
Thank you so much for that. Love you, brother.
Love you too. Thanks for listening. If you've got something out of this conversation, I encourage you to share it, rate it, or leave a review, as it really helps others find the show. If you're not already subscribed, hit the button on your podcast app or on YouTube at Talal. We drop episodes every fortnight, each one a deep dive with someone who isn't afraid to speak their mind or stand their ground. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.